A school district. We all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with justice for all. Thank you. We have roll call, please.
Mr. Frederick,
Is not able to be here this evening. He's not well.
Mr. Hosterman,
Here.
Mr. Hunt,
Here.
Ms. Kessler,
Here.
Mr. Moser,
He's not here. I've not heard from him, so it's possible that he'll show up.
Dr. Strasser,
Here.
Mr. Harris,
Here.
Dr. Weaver,
Here.
Mrs. Rance.
Here.
Thank you.
We have comments from visitors this evening.
I have not
Received
received
nothing. Okay, thank you. Under Executive Committee this evening, we have two students that are going to be approved as school board representatives.
So just a reminder to the board that last spring when we approved the policies, the zeros policies, we came across the fact that we could have student representatives to the board. This past spring, we talked about it. I believe in the fall, when we got back to school, one of the goals was to have a junior and a senior. I think through the process, we found two seniors that have an interest. You have in your packet the information about their interest in it. I did meet with them this afternoon, to talk with them about their responsibilities if they're approved. Both very excited. Violet is actually here with us this evening. And Zoe will be joining us next week if they're both approved. Any questions from the board?
If there's no questions, I'd like to, recommend approval for Violet Bell and Zoe Latier, to serve as student representatives to the school board for the 2023-2024 school year.
Second.
Motion and a second. Are there any questions? So we have roll call, please.
Mr. Hosterman,
Yes.
Mr. Hunt,
Yes.
Ms. Kessler,
Yes.
Dr. Strasser,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Dr. Weaver,
Yes.
Mrs. Rance.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Proposed agenda items. Excuse me.
Congratulations, Violet.
Yes. I'm sorry. They're here. Okay.
Violet is here.
Violet is here. I'm sorry, I didn't realize that. Congratulations. Thank you for being here. Executive. Few things on the agenda. Anybody has questions on any of those items under Executive Report 6A 1, 2, 3, 4,
So
5?
So I will give some information on a few of these. So it's starting on 6A, I think within some of those are some normal agreements that come together. 6A3 is an agreement between the Milton Area School District and the Athletic Booster Club. Mrs. Weaver is here. We've spent a lot of time talking through the past year, all the different things when it comes to the concession stand outside, but most importantly, all the pieces of the puzzle. The district did invest a lot of money into the equipment that is in there. The initial agreement that you have in your packet just outlines our responsibility as a district when it comes to repairs and keeping things moving forward within that. They are more responsible for the consumable kind of things. I think it's important because of the fact that it's the equipment we bought, that we have some level of agreement with them. They are going to be discussing it as well next week. So this may be something we continue to discuss over the next month, but I just think it's important that we get something together that references an understanding with them of who's responsible for what areas of the concession stands. So I'm open to ideas, thoughts. Like I said, they're going to be discussing it as well.
So we will vote on that next week.
Vote on that next week, so we
We'll
can.
meet this week. Have any questions?
Six B, I'm going to spend a little bit of time. Okay. So 6B1 and 6B2. 6B1 is a memorandum agreement with our union regarding flexible instruction days. That is something that existed prior in this school district because of, when the state went to flexible instruction days. And just a reminder, last year, we did not have the option of flexible instruction days. With that option, it's important that we have an agreement in place with the union of what the expectations are based on past practice. It's not anything spectacular, just references being available throughout the school day if we choose to go that direction. So it's definitely a formality, but ultimately, something we want to make sure is in place in case that happens. Any questions on that one? 6B2 is a little bit bigger. 6B2 is something, and I recognize it may take some time to look through this and discuss it. 6B2 references looking at creating a memorandum with the union focused on our district wanting to be at the top of recruitment, looking at the fact that we've got a teacher shortage and that our goal through that process is to recruit the highest quality teachers we can. So right now within our agreement with the union, we do not recognize private school service. We do not recognize out of state. I think it is something that can move us forward. Not a lot of districts are there right now from a recruitment standpoint when we're trying to bring in teachers. I will speak more about this next week, but Dr. Mumin was here, of course, yesterday, Secretary of Education. He kept referencing to us, teaching's a local phenomenon and you want your community to be wrapped around teaching. My mind went back thinking of this. If we ever have people who have left the district or are out of state and we want to bring them back to our community, another great way to bring them back. This agreement would allow us to recognize some years of service. At this moment, what I've done as part of this agreement is I went back to the early bird signing of the contract, which was in 21-22. Looked at that year, 22-23, and then this year. Handful of people would be eligible for this. This would not be, they would get the pays for those past years. It would be a one-time bump for that group of people if we were to choose to include that. I did some of the math on this, just to give you factual numbers from a budget standpoint. The budgeted positions just this year that we replaced. Okay, so you have the people when Mr. Fink created the budget, there's a line item number that goes in there when it comes to the cost for a teacher. We have to start in the budget process with the current teachers we have. As people leave and we replace, most times you are a little bit low in most situations. So just this year alone, based on where we were budgeted, where we would be in savings is about $89,000 with the people we've hired. If we were to choose to do this, yes, it would be a cost to the district, approximately $40,000, $38,000 to $40,000 one time. We're still $50,000 better than we were a year ago when it comes to the budget. So I don't want to say there's not a cost with this, but I'm trying to look at it from first and foremost, the recruitment standpoint of being as, Milton being as lucrative as possible to any candidate coming to us. We still get the decision whether or not we hire somebody, when it comes to whether they've had experience or not. But then number two is that, of course, there is a cost, but I do believe that cost is very valuable to us in, recognizing those years of service. This would only be a memorandum through the end of the current contract. So it's something if we don't think it's working or we're not comfortable with at the end of it, or it hasn't benefited us, it can be something that's not renewed in the next contract. I realize that's a big thing, but I do think it's important to be discussed there. And it may be something you have to think about over the week, and we can discuss, of course, next week before voting on anything.
Why wouldn't we wait until the contract is ready to renegotiate?
I think my reasoning for that would be we are in such a crisis, such a shortage right now, that the more we can do to maximize whatever we can get when it comes to experience is necessary. I'll be honest with the board, I've had some great concern, and I think the leadership team would speak to this with some of the inexperience that's coming out in brand new teachers. More than ever. So when we get that opportunity and we get somebody that wants to come to us, I think it's worth a little bit of the increase in salary to maximize high quality candidates for our students. The other thing that's in there is some of the district goals. I'm going to be providing you a presentation next week on the district goal connected to the performance objectives as required in my contract. So that will all be something we discuss next week. So that's 6A to 6F.
Any other questions under executive?
Thank you.
All right. Education and Technology Committee, Mr. Osterman.
Yes, we're gonna have a few presentations. So, Ms. Ham, I believe you're first. I need to step out for a phone call here shortly, just so.
So Courtney's going to present to you a little bit on, within her role as supervisor of educational data analysis. Focusing on some of the work they've done on assessment going into the school year.
Good evening, board. In your packets, you should have a copy of the 23-24 assessment calendar. And I'm not going to go through that in a lot of detail, just pull out some highlights. But one of the, our focuses and our goals this year is to bring attention back to academics. So we thought highlighting the assessment calendar that we've developed would be a good start to that. So our assessment calendar is a comprehensive assessment tool. This includes assessments that go beyond just academics. As you'll see, we do behavior screeners. We have a tool that identifies students for gifted programs. And we also believe that multiple data points that are assessed throughout the year are good for student intervention so that we can see not just one assessment or one snapshot in time. There was a webinar that I attended back in the winter that showcased different assessment calendars from other LEAs, and the one that you have is the one that in looking at this with the leadership team, we thought was the best approach because it encompasses what is our plan after we administer the assessment? How are we going to communicate this information out to teachers, to families? So while it is a little bit lengthy than previous calendars, we thought this was a good approach to kind of see by grade level, what are we assessing, when are we assessing, and how are we getting that data out to the appropriate stakeholders. So just a note with that as well, the assessment calendar is not new. This type of assessment calendar, though, is new for this year, just the model. Focus area 2 is really, again, looking at getting back to academics. Our Future Ready Index is our report card. So how are we going to align our assessments around that so that we are meeting our own objectives as well as state performance goals? So we looked at all of the assessments that we were offering throughout, leadership meetings, data mining, and there are some assessments that we were like, you know what, we're doing this one too often. We'd prefer to do this one at the beginning and end of year. An example of that is at the elementary level. We were testing iReady diagnostics as well as CDT, classroom diagnostic tools. We decided to do the CDT more in the middle of the year, October, November, March, and do the iReady diagnostics right at the beginning and right at the end of school to assess. iReady we were doing beginning, middle, and end, so we eliminated that middle piece because we are focused on the CDT during that time. So our assessments, of course, will allow for, at the completion for us to discuss with the teachers, what does our data look like? And with the calendar that was approved for this year, we have specific professional development days that are focused on data analysis, and that's reflected in the calendar as well, that we will be looking at specific data coming up again, or already on the 22nd at our beginning of year data. So I just pulled out the most common assessments from the calendar, just a quick snapshot of what is administered throughout the year and by grade level. These are all things that you're probably, or families are used to seeing in the community portal. All of our assessments are cataloged in there and are, visible by school district staff as well as families. So these are the most common assessments that we are administering throughout the year. So our next steps, for me, this is, ultimately my guideline. I assist with setting up the assessments prior to the dates that are listed here. A lot of them are online. CDTs, for example, the teachers need specific tickets for each student. It's a unique ticket, so I set those up. And then once that assessment is complete, based on the end date that we have here, I go into those different software and upload the data into Sapphire, and then we set aside time to look at that. Like, what does our data look like? What how is this going to drive our instruction? So as I mentioned, we'll be working on our beginning of year data already, getting that into Sapphire and reviewing that next week at our PD day. And I also just wanted to kind of kick it over to a principal to kind of talk about how it's used at their building. So I've asked Mr. Settler to provide some feedback on that.
Thank you, Mrs. Ham. Good evening, board. This comprehensive assessment calendar has been a real tool to myself. I'll speak for myself at White Deer. It allows us to get really deep into our conversations around student data. We have a plethora of student data available to us, from state assessment data, classroom assessment data, and then a wealth of diagnostic data that we get from a variety of probes and platforms. And so having a one-stop shop that kind of puts that puzzle together really aids me as an instructional leader as I sit down with my staff as a touch point to make sure that when we're having discussions around student academic achievement, student progress, whether it's behavioral or academic, that we're including all the key pieces of the data that make up the whole picture of the child. So I really felt that Courtney's addition to this year's calendar was critical for myself. I know that my staff have appreciated it as well, and it's really driven some conversations we've had already just in the first month of school. We're really looking forward to the opportunities that are built into our PLCs and professional development cycle around data conversations. I think that we're going to see a great benefit from that throughout this year. And, just another thanks to Courtney for her efforts putting this map together for us.
Does anyone have any questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Courtney.
So on the agenda, we have a presentation by Catherine Gerton.
You. So this evening, I'm going to talk briefly about our attendance policy and procedures. In the spring, Dr. Strasser presented some concerns in a board meeting about our current policy related to cumulative attendance and student attendance improvement conferences and student attendance improvement plans. So we'll get started. Our policy is 204, that covers attendance, and specific to the school attendance improvement conferences, which leads to the student attendance improvement plans, also known as SAPEs. The conferences are needed once a student hits more than 3 unexcused absences. So the policy says it may be offered, the conference with the parents may be offered with 3 unexcused days, and then it indicates it shall be offered once there is an additional unexcused day. Our prior practice, our practice last year and for years prior, is that we would also do these conferences and these plans if a student had an accumulation of 10 or more excused absences. But that is not covered under our policy. So within policy, we are able to change our practices, and for the 23-24 school year, we'll no longer be doing student assistant improvement conferences or plans on students that have excused absences. And it's my understanding that that is a significant change with regard to the workload of each of the building principals, dean of students, assistant principals, guidance counselors. And for those of you who have children who were sick often, legitimately sick, and providing excuses, that will not be something that the district will be contacting you about. Not 100% sure of the reason why we did that, but in my research over the summer, there is information and research about chronic absences and the recommendation that school districts meet with parents to try and determine why they are not attending school. And there's information about SAPES given there, but we already made that change. Principals, assistant principals, guidance counselors, I believe, are happy with that change, and I hope our parents will be as well. Okay, cumulative absences. In our current policy, it indicates there's a maximum of 10 days of cumulative lawful absences. It needs to be verified by parent notification. And any absences beyond 10 days shall require an excuse from a licensed practitioner of healing arts. That's our current language in policy 204. Next slide. So when we look at our policies, we also then look at the basic education circular. That is a tool that superintendents, their executive assistants, and use. So I went and looked at the basic ed circular for school code on compulsory education. And it allows school districts to determine the maximum number of lawful absences verified by parental notification acceptable in one school term. So our 10 days is really established by you, the board. For all absences beyond the maximum amount, each school and non-public school should state whether it will require an excuse from a physician in order for an absent to be considered lawful. Again, our language is a licensed practitioner of the healing arts, which has caused some confusion to parents and to administrators too, as far as what we are accepting and from whom. Lastly, school districts must consider whether these absences are part of a medical condition or a disability, and whether that topic is addressed within our attendance policy. As a former, supervisor of special ed, when you have chronic absences, you look at, is this related to a disability, and therefore does the student potentially qualify for a 504 service plan for that disability, or in some cases, an evaluation for a special education eligibility, which could possibly lead to a 504. So that, or, with the school nurse, it might be an IHP, an individualized healthcare plan as well. So that is what's allowable by school code. So the considerations for the board is whether or not you are interested in a policy change for policy 204. You have the flexibility to increase the total number of cumulative days verified by the parent. Again, it's currently at 10, but you can move it higher if you wish. Among the administrative team, we would like you also to consider possibly excluding educational field trips from that total amount, and potentially changing that language from licensed practitioner of healing arts to potentially a physician or a medical professional, licensed medical professional, just to clear up that language a little bit. Principals' input, they are comfortable with no more than 17 days of absences per year. Why 17? There is research, empirical research done that shows once you hit 18 days, that would be 10% of a school year. You do see a significant increase in dropout rates, as well as a decrease in students' grades. Again, if it's a medical condition that would trigger a 504 or emergency, an individual health plan, some accommodations would be put in place for the student to be able to make up work or perhaps get some additional tutoring or support. But if it's just an accumulation of absences, there is shown decrease in grades and an increase of dropouts. So the principals settled on the number of 17. They would also like you to consider that if it remains at 10, that we exclude approved educational field trip days. So maybe it's 10 days with the parent and then up to another 5 or 7 days for educational field trips. And lastly, changing that healing arts language to something more physician or medical provider. That's all I have for you. If you would like us to move forward with any potential policy changes, we would move into that process within the board. Any questions for me?
Yes.
Say we move forward.
I think it's great.
I
I've been waiting for
agree.
educational visits not to count for a long time.
Yeah. I credit the principals and Catherine, the team, just for, it's not often districts dive into this because it just seems like, okay, here it is, but here's the code, here's the policy. And I mean, this is people's lives, right? Every single one of us that has kids in the district or in any school district, every day you're like, oh, are they sick today? And how many days do I have left? So,
And I think the CDC changed that a lot too with COVID, because you have to have 5 days off COVID. That's a big chunk of your time.
correct.
Very true. I mean, we used to give awards for perfect attendance, right? We don't necessarily want kids coming to school sick, but I was certainly one of those parents last year. Mrs. Kessler, I know you were as well. We
22 days.
we were very aware of where we were with our sick children, our legitimately sick children. So
So what we'll do is we'll put together the policy and we'll have it for the October meeting with some of this wording. We'll stick within what the principal's input there unless there's something else from the board you'd like to see.
I think it sounds great.
As a parent, I like
Yeah.
this.
I do
Great.
too.
It allows some educational flexibility. If, I want to go to a farm show or something, I can take her and do those things.
Well, I think it falls in line with what we're about, right? There's other opportunities in education outside of just being in a classroom.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mrs. Girton.
you're welcome.
On the agenda, there are 2 proposed items under education and technology. Any questions? That's everything, Mrs. Rand.
One further comment on that. We should probably not tell the students they're allowed that many days off. I'm not gonna let mine know.
It's a parent responsibility.
Is there anything from the proposed? No? All right. And we'll move on to Personnel Committee. Dr. Weaver.
To make a motion to recommend approval of the following professional staff employee with all benefits as stated in the professional agreement, pending clearances and certification. That is for Sean Moore, Social Studies, Master Step 2, on or after September 13th.
Second.
The motion and a second. Are there any questions? Could we have roll call, please?
Mr. Hunt,
Yes.
Ms. Kessler,
Yes.
Mr. Moser,
Yes.
Dr. Strasser,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Dr. Weaver,
Yes.
Mr. Hosterman,
Yes.
Mrs. Rance.
Yes.
Sean is here. Welcome, Sean. Just to be clear with the board, when we interviewed Sean is going to be a game changer for our school district in social studies. Mr. Vega is a loss for us, but we're very excited to have Sean home. He's coming home.
Yeah.
Right? Coming home.
And the agenda items. 11A, 11O.
Oh, yeah.
for the filling positions. Cafeterias.
Mrs. Rance asked how we're doing with filling positions. I think, we still got some holes that are there. We're getting there. I think Mrs. Reese is probably still short a few people, especially part-time. So if anybody wants to be a part-time, from a professional staff, hopefully we will have things back to full staff by next board meeting. I'm trying to think. I don't think there's any other professional staff. If you have a few para openings still, two opening.
Like 2 or 3
Okay.
Still do.
I know there's a lot of detail in 11A to O, so if there's any questions on anything specific.
There's a lot. Okay, Finance Committee, Mr. Moser.
Like this evening, we have just proposed agenda items. Once I find those, go over them.
Page 3.
7A, 7.
Looks like standard operating procedure for finance. That's it this evening.
No questions from anyone? Okay, great. Facilities Committee, Mr. Hosterman, and Mr. Moser.
I believe we'll have a presentation about the Bacher renovation and the playground.
So I'm going to invite Mr. Eric Grimes up. We're going to show you a little bit of the vision for the Bacher playground. I know we talked time frame of keeping this process moving forward.
Thank you.
I got mine. Okay.
Thank you.
Pretty cool.
Yes.
I want to play.
You excited?
I want
You didn't take the aviation.
Sure. Just kind of walk them through what we have here.
traditional posts. Okay, so this I'll talk about this.
Not big.
As well, because it's something like this, they can access access so this this I've been down this line and also but when it does start to descend, you can go flying out in slide. Oh, exception when you sit down, start to go. What happens is you start to get slide here that is so this is and in order to feel like and you know, we are it's new space infrastructure. There's so much more. Whole setting, kids have achieved quite well. And there's certain so but this surface is important. 1,007 and allow that's what I would remind kids they don't ships right. It's built in. There it is. It also but at the same time, it's helps calm down. So. Yeah.
Is that the total number of swings we have though? 8? Is that the entire? I'm only thinking to add another section of swings. I don't know offhand how many kiddos go out for recess at a time, but I know swings are like the number one thing they run to.
We did have them take the tiled swings off the infant swings.
Yeah.
And we added a bit.
Yeah,
This is about the 7th, 8th division.
yeah,
I'm sure.
it was one less bank of it prior to that with baby swings.
The only thing that
You have to make a bigger surface.
when you get a bigger surface, then because of the sheer volume of space you need on a swing, it comes down to, and I think, that maybe as we're discussing this, the conversation about how many kids will be out there at one time.
Right.
If you're sending a certain amount out, 8's more than enough because they can rotate through.
How many kids do you think would be using this?
I think that's a question to be discussed as
We
part of this.
did talk about that at the one meeting.
Dave, on average, right now, when you send kids out, how many kids are out there at one given time?
There he is.
We have 7.
At the time.
There's a lot to do there for 100 kids.
And this is going to be our only playground, correct?
Correct.
I don't. I
And there's
still
nothing
feel
we
like
have
need-
currently that could be moved and put in position.
No. So we're going to come up, as you look at the end of this, and I don't want to jump ahead, but ultimately, everything else, we did a full walkthrough. It is, I think the one slide I looked at Dave and I said, that's pretty new. And he's like 1987. So there's really nothing there that is worth or valued at keeping.
That's the best stuff.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, everything.
And I apologize. I missed the planning meeting, so I don't want to speak too much, but I looked at it. My gut feeling was this is too small. Just knowing how many kids go out to play in a normal recess.
We said about 100 kids. Is that the estimate?
Say that again, Joel.
Is that the estimate? About 100 kids go out here at a time? 110.
They go out by grade. Depending on what.
Is this the same size as it was when I saw the original plans?
I think it's a little bit bigger, right? Isn't it a little bit larger because of the day?
Did make it bigger.
I think what happens with this is we get nervous that it's not going to be too big. I think when I looked at this and the conversation we've had with Eric is we need to be within our budget. Right. We need to live within cost of equipment, cost of the port surface. If you're looking at the numbers, I'm sure some of you jumped ahead. Port surface, anybody will tell you, is almost the same price as equipment because of the sheer surface you're using. I get it, but I think
I get we want to stay on our budget, but I also get the fact that 3 years from now, the PSA comes and says, well, guess what? Our playground isn't big.
What was the budget amount to it?
500.
500,000 for the
Yes.
playground.
Yes.
And we're at a $250,000. So what
You're
would
at 475 total. Everything with removal, excavation, everything you're doing.
site work adds up?
Site work adds up.
Quick question. When you, Dave, when you have 100, 130 kids out there, and there's also like the Gaga pit, there's also the field, there's also games happening, so not all of them are on the playground. Right now.
Should be a
Right. Right. There's like hardly anything there right now. Yeah. I just think it's something important to keep in mind. We're not talking about 100 kids on the playground at once.
Mr. Gemlin, we go to the next slide. Just to go, I know you're not going to be able to see numbers, but it's what, 90? Or is it 90 by what?
87, 78.
Okay. 90 by 80.
300.
For the board too, the location of this would be coming out of
6,900.
C-Pod, coming out of C-Pod, that down in that corner. it would be visual as you're driving onto campus. You could see it over there. You could probably also see it from 147 through the trees.
Is it beyond where a potential addition we built?
Curveball.
The end.
Well, I mean, there was,
Or was that?
I had sketch plans drawn when we started this whole project, Alvin remembers,
Yeah, but
for an
it-
addition coming off a D-pod.
the second floor, I don't think could handle it right.
No, it was a complete addition coming out of the end.
Come
of
off a D-pod towards where the kindergarten
From
playground is?
D-pod, no, D-pod towards Route 180 or 147.
Sorry.
Somebody should probably go back and find those original plans.
So you're talking where the buses park?
Between D-pod and 180. There was a two-story addition.
The original feasibility. study,
Original feasibility study Kevin had asked for. We thought it was a good idea just to explore.
Big book. Not that. Not that one.
No, way back. It's in the binder.
So would we be in, are we designing this in that area?
Just trying to forward think a little bit, that in case that would happen.
In the
It's to the
binder.
left of it. Yeah, I'm never gonna argue for more things for kids. I
Right.
also don't want to overbuild it when there's, we are lucky that we've got the space for kids to run
Right.
and do other
I'm
things.
also trying to plan for the future. If for some reason we wouldn't need that addition, 15, 20 years from now, we have to move this $500,000 playground that's set to last a long time.
We'll look at that. We'll look at exactly location. But just to add to this is for the board to understand, and Gordon's over here, complete removal of everything else. All the old stuff goes behind C-Pod, out on E-Pod. We're gonna try and clean that all up, make it look nice. But this would be the playground area would all shift back. The other thing we've talked about is behind C-Pod, maybe down the road. And I credit Eric, this number's even come down from last time we discussed. Trying to do something creative on the blacktop behind C-Pod. I've seen a lot of schools do that, where put things on the pavement, like kind of a artist in residency program, where you have another area for kids to play on. So. I think where we're at today is, is it big enough? Is it what you want? Is it, when you look at the big picture, what other questions do we need to answer? I do believe our conversation has been November, probably. We want to be moving forward on this because you're talking 6 months solid. So we're ready to install this summer.
And this is known. Milton, there's people that live in this. So Norm James, Ryan spoke. I gave you size for this now. Pretty heavy. He's like, gotta go back and so I think it will. I was, there's nothing here. This is the largest discount approved in history. So with the play structures and I've never, probably didn't. This is more about.
Thank you. I think for the facility committee that was there, I think we were at 497 last time when we looked at this, and then we were talking about adding that second bay, which meant a little bit bigger area. So, and I think we're at 474 right now. That's everything. Gordon's got it, right? Everything's removal.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
So we'll continue, to move forward. I mean, if there's other things from the board,
I just want to see where the plan is. Like, I'm gonna stop by one day and actually see what we're looking to actually fill
Certainly.
out the facility.
Dave, I think you're welcome anytime. I actually made them show me with like a
That's what I
tape
want to
measure.
see.
I took a tape measure out. I go, where are we starting? Where are we ending? I don't know if it's within that footprint, but we can look at that.
just something to think
Sure.
about before we.
No problem.
To picture this like in comparison to the Lewisburg Park, because I've gone there quite often with my kids. How big is this compared to that? Is it similar in size? Yeah, it looks like that.
So 6,952 square
It
feet.
just feels like it gets congested sometimes when we're there, and I'm just picturing like 140 of our. I'm not trying to say let's spend more money because you know I hate spending money, but I'm all for doing it right the first time and not having to do it again or add anything down the road. I mean, is it?
I will also say this, and I don't want to speak over Mr. Slater. We can also adjust recess to meet some of the need of the quantity of kids out. So don't like,
I feel
I
like-
had to live that and do the same thing. Like you can, like, if let's just say we do go to a realignment and you have 7 kindergarten, 7 first grades or whatever, you might have to do 4 of them and 3 of them, and then, you know, break down your times that you're outside. You might have kids outside from 10 o'clock to 2 o'clock, but they rotate every half an hour.
Right now, large field, slide. All of it. The second. And one. They go up to 100. They have 2 staggered.
Yeah, I'm just picturing the area and the congestion that could
Do
happen.
you have the breakdown? You said this is similar to the Lewisburg layout. Would you happen to be able to provide just a sample of, like, you gave us the measurements with the distances, but can you give us just a comparison? You can email us, if you give a copy, just so we can have like a comparison to see what it would look like because that's a visual we already can kind of reference.
What excites me is, listen, we all been there. We take our kids over to Lewisburg to the park. I want it to be,
Oh, I think
families are going there.
Yeah, well, that's what I was thinking. If
That's
we can get give us a decent representation for the blueprints.
So you want the comparison, Lewisburg.
Lego. Not the swimming.
So we're what, 25,000 budget? We're approximately 25,000.
Well, and I don't want to speak out of turn. I would say we're, I believe there is 25,000, Dr. Strasser.
25,000.
I believe there's $25,000 sitting that is delegated inside of the Panther Legacy. I think we talked about that. So give or take, we're 50,000 under
It's too
budget.
crowded. Let's just spend 25,000 more on base and just spread some things out a little
I
bit
know,
more.
even that, I think.
Give the kids some more room to run around.
How much space could we add for roughly 50,000?
What do you have into
What do we
square
have
foot?
for 25 grand?
I think if we're gonna spend the money, we should spend it on, like you initially started, another set of swings.
Yes.
It sounds like we're
How many swings do we have? Just, do you know, Mr. Slater, how many swings we have currently? We have 12 right now.
Because we do have the field and we do have blacktops, there's space for the kids to run. They
Yeah.
don't need to be running around.
I'm just,
Playground area. You're right with the swings. 100 kids and only 8 swings.
it's not enough.
on that.
The 12 we have now aren't enough.
If we do realignment, would there anything be up here that we can move over there too? Like
We talked, it's not that we haven't talked about, you know, is there stuff you can move? You just get into footers and I think a lot of cost in doing that, but site work.
Yeah.
And one more question, sorry. So this would be good for all age groups, right? Even if we considered realignment and moved it. Okay. Right, just in case. Okay.
44 and I'm going.
Yeah.
Well, it's fun.
Can we find out how much money is in the capital campaign earmarked for playgrounds? I know at least 25 grand from the PTSA. You know, I personally donated money. It was earmarked for playgrounds.
We had looked at this a few months ago. I'd asked Mr. Toll to send it to me. I will look here as we're talking a little bit and maybe come back to it. If not, I'll get that. So two things we'll look at is the earmark. We'll look at what the Lewisburg, Huffnagel, is that the one we're talking about? Huffnagel, what the dimensions of that are, comparisons. We can, come back to you with that next week. Do you want, if we added another bay of swings, what that additional cost would be?
I would
Yes, that's something we can. Yeah, I agree. I wouldn't just add space simply because you can use grass outside of that. But I think if we can look on an outside area to add, are you opposed to that? So we can see what the cost is if it brings us in.
You
that
also
budget.
have to add,
Yeah,
yes,
we have to add a little bit. Shift, so
'cause it has to be a certain amount beyond
it's that.
playground equipment.
I think the same thing, the same bay, that swing. So let's start there.
Are you allowed to have swings just on grass anymore?
That's what I was wondering. Does it have to be?
No,
You're not?
it
Okay, I
has to
don't.
be a certain
There's
amount.
your answer.
Yeah, I didn't know.
No, I didn't know.
Right. Me too.
So we'll work on those couple things. We'll come back. Like I said, the goal was tonight to get the conversation started. So for October, we're really in decision-making mode and then finalizing decision by November. That work?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Gordon.
I didn't make that either.
By the way, if this goes through the board picture, for next year we'll be on the equipment.
Mr. Moser, if you want to move on to the
9A2.
Mr. Hosterman had to step out.
Oh, we did. Proposed agenda items.
It's,
Nope, 9A2. School safety,
facilities.
security.
School safety, sorry. School safety and security. Catherine?
Mr. Osterman stepped out, but we'll review this with him. Go ahead, Mrs. Gurton. Oh, well, who's going first?
Well, I'll just get a
Start off.
framework. Sure. We wanted to give you an update on a couple school safety matters. First of all, the principals recently led Alice active shooter training on our professional development day. This is the first year that all buildings trained at the same time. So the investment that we made in our principals getting Alice certified as trainers paid off because we were able to very efficiently train everyone in the district at the same time. That was piggybacked with a trauma training that was led by our trauma team. Mr. Slesser back there, one of our guidance counselors, is a member of that trauma team. Again, they were able to train in their own buildings with their own peers and have that training done by their guidance counselors, school nurses. The other update is that we have finished updates, our yearly updates on our emergency operations plans. This year, I moved them over to the PIMA template, and they're housed in our Navigate 360 emergency operations software. They were reviewed by each of the principals, and all three school resource officers reviewed the plans, made some recommendations for changes, and they are in place. Just wanted to make note that those are not board-approved documents, as there's confidential operational activities in those plans. But please know that they are done and will be dispersed to police and fire departments locally, and Northumberland County and Union County emergency management agencies as well. Lastly, Mr. Hostman brought up the secure vestibule topic at our last meeting, and as a central office team, Jeff, certainly at the lead, came up with some options for adding some secure vestibules in the buildings that currently don't have them. So I'll turn that over to him to talk about what steps he's taken and what our plans are there.
Good evening. I had a company, AG Morrow, into this school to start with, and talking about the secure vestibules. He says this is not uncommon anymore today. A lot of existing schools now are looking for ways to make secure vestibules within their footprint of their district. And we went over some things we could do right out front here. And to them, it's simple. And next Tuesday, they're coming back to look at the high school, middle school, and obviously we're going to go over to Bacher, but pretty much with the new design, that's going to be taken care of. Along with the structural part of things, there's a new window film out there that all the districts that they're going down this avenue are going to. It's made by 3M. It's a bullet resistant, not bulletproof, bullet resistant film they're putting over the glass in schools. It also resists hurricanes, things like rocks and things that would fly into the windows. It prevents stuff from going through. It'll shatter the window and it stays in place. So I have a company coming from Bellefonte and another coming locally, actually. It's another 3M dealer. They're coming to look at all of our vestibule areas 2 weeks from today. So actually, I think it's the 26th is they're coming. So I'm going to try to envelope all this together with the secure vestibules, with also with NRG, with the fobbing of the doors, both interior and exterior, like we did out back at the high school. Putting a camera, a button push, so somebody needs to get in with the doors are locked. They push the button, the camera goes up. You know, a lot of that security thing there, without building a whole nother vestibule within the building. So there's a lot of things we can do with what we already have to enhance security. So as we progress in this, next Tuesday, I should have another answer for you guys at the board meeting if you care to ask. They're going to be here next Tuesday morning. So by then they'll give me some more ideas what we could do at some other schools. But they did suggest right out here, he goes, listen, you got a vestibule. He goes, make it secure. And he gave me some pointers. He said, put a hole in between the two vestibules here and put it into the principal's office so they can actually buzz them into there if they want to go in and register a parent or whoever comes in. They go in and do the computer thing, get their tag and come through, or they buzz them again and come through this way. As a few of us spoke at Bacher, I'm looking at doing the same thing out back in that glass little vestibule out back. I'm working on getting glass erectors in here to look at some door issues, cameras with NRG and fob work back there. Obviously, the front entrance is going to be done. The high school, middle school, the middle school is actually in pretty good shape there. We can make some adjustments and also use the films. In the high school, again, we're just reconfiguring doors and going to make it work in a more secure fashion. So I am in the process of doing all that kind of thing, and we'll see where our number one is. Anybody have any questions for me?
That vestibule at Bacher ever an entrance to anything? That one on the side? It's like
The glass?
yeah.
Okay, so
actually, Jeff, with that, will you give a quick update that I can jump into on the canopy? We didn't go over that. I think the whole board should hear that.
Because nobody called me.
okay.
Want
Glad
me
you
to start?
asked me to do this. So we did meet, the committee met last Thursday, and we just had the canopy designers, the engineering firm, come back in and look at reducing the footprint of the canopy to kind of bring some costs down and not so monstrosity thing to dwarf our building. So with that being said, they went back out, they're giving us 3 more, I think, like snapshot design type of thing. and saying, hey, here's what it looked like with this, this, and this, and the board would then give a better idea of what they're kind of looking for. And then we'll go out to like a resign and maybe get a budget number on that. Again, we talked a little bit about the handicap ramp and covering that, or what I suggested and I brought up to the board people that were there is out back. We used to have a kindergarten play area that we look at doing some new things out there. And we used to have the bands drop off in the little, we call it the circle right there. What I said we could do is, again, make that the band service, handicap accessibility right through the building, right into the glass. Well, it's a glass built entry area now that actually goes right into 2 classrooms. But what I would like to do is, instead of having a wall built down the middle of that, is build out 2 walls and having a hallway to be accessible both with handicap or maybe grandparents that come in to eat lunch, or whomever. So we could drop off the vans there to keep the vans away from down front, like where the parent drop off is, and the buses, give them their own area to have their kids getting off and go in. I think Dave or Derek or somebody asked me about, like, at a hospital door, you push the button and the door comes open. Maybe something like that too. I'm gonna talk about and see what's available, what's out there with glass erectors. But I would like to use that area right there to make it, a couple different things. It could be, I know Norm's looking with Geisinger to do some kind of outdoor educational area there. But I would also like to make it a usable area for the bands. So
You're
we're looking at a
that's
bunch
the
of
area
different.
you're talking about, we would need to secure similar to these areas.
Yes,
The the brand new entrance would be done through the project.
Yeah, Thursday morning, I'm having that glass directors gentleman come and meet with me and talk about securing up that little vestibule there. So they'll meet with me Thursday morning. I've been pretty busy trying to get all this stuff ironed out because Derek came with a budget book and we got to get to work.
Thank you.
Anybody have any questions about that?
I think that's a great idea, of adding that
To further update the board, the general consensus was to
clutter.
leave the current handicap ramp there
Yeah.
for use if somebody needs to use it to come into the office, but
Right.
not have the expense to cover it. If we provide this access out back,
Sure.
Yeah.
students can use that on a daily basis, and handicaps, anybody that needs it to come into the building can use that entrance.
Well, it helps to reduce the traffic.
Right, and reduces the traffic flow out, increases traffic flow out front. We can build a practical canopy.
That makes more sense.
Yes.
Done?
That's it.
Before we finish with facilities, I would like to actually make a request to the board if possible. You have in your packets, it's Northumberland County Juvenile Community Service Work Program Site Contract. I'm going to ask the board to consider adding that to tonight's agenda to vote on. What we're at is we became aware, I think 2 weeks ago, they had an interest. I believe it was today where we got the go ahead that they really want to get started. So what this is I think anybody that was here prior, the Lions Club, I believe, was who came in and did some cleaning after football games, service previously. This would be through the Northumberland County Juvenile Community Service. It would be an agreement. They are willing, I believe the goal is they could even start after this Friday night, coming in Saturday morning. That's why I'm asking you to consider, immediately so we could allow them to do that. I think it's a great addition to, good partnership, but also allow us to be part of or get some more cleaning out of it. So no students would be around during those times, of course. We would work closely with the people in charge, but the board would choose not to be okay with that tonight. I get that as well, but it would allow us to move forward this week with making it happen. So we would need to add the agenda item and then vote. We'd have to open for comment too as well.
I'm in favor of adding it.
I second that.
Anybody opposed to adding it?
No. I second it.
So we'll need a motion to add it.
I'll make a motion to add the contract for the Northumberland County Juvenile Community Service Work Program.
We'll have to ask for public comment. Anyone?
Second it.
Yeah. Motion and a second. Prior to voting, though, are there any comments from the folks who are attending this evening?
I do believe this was in place before Rod came, like before the Lions Club took over. I think it was juvenile probation kids, right, Alvin?
This isn't new.
Yeah. This
There's
is
someone in the back that does have a comment. Would you please stand? So we can hear. Thanks.
need to vote to add.
Okay, so there was a motion and a second. Could we have roll call, please?
Mr. Hunt,
Yes.
Mr. Moser,
Yes.
Ms. Kessler,
Yes.
Dr. Strasser,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Dr. Weaver,
Yes.
Mr. Hosterman,
Yes.
Mrs. Rance.
Yes.
Okay,
So we need, now we need the approval to approve the actual thing. We just approved adding it to the agenda.
make a motion.
Yes.
Thank you.
Now you need a second. Now you
A
need to approve. So motion and a second to approve the community service work program with Northumberland County Juvenile. Are there any questions? We have roll call, please.
Mr. Moser,
Yes.
Dr. Strasser,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Dr. Weaver,
Yes.
Mr. Hosterman, Mr. Hunt,
Yes.
Ms. Kessler,
Yes.
Mrs. Rance.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
So in
Just
addition to the,
to be clear, there could be students present, but they would be students who are already on probation and a part of that program.
Thank you.
anybody else? On the agenda, there's a list of decommissioned items and then 4 items, uses facility items. Any questions? Now nobody has a question. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, if there's nothing else. We'll move on to Legislative and Policy Committee, Mr. Hosterman. Mrs. Kessler.
We only have the agenda. That one?
Nope, 10A. Well, we have review policy 96.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So policy 916, always the one, I think, when we discussed this previously, it's always one that gets a lot of attention, volunteers. What I will share with the board to consider in this policy, I think when we dove in this summer, we had some time to take a step back. What we realized was some of the confusion I think we were looking at was becoming that there were redundant terminologies, coach, volunteer coach, all those kind of things. What this policy comes down to is 3 terms. Visitor, I'm going to make sure I say it all correctly. Get it out here. Guest volunteer and position volunteer. What our intention with the adjustment and getting rid of some of the additional wording is to clearly identify, feel like what we can do then as a team is say, if we know these 3 terms, we can work and say, these are visitors. We can have like a procedural piece for the board of, we are identifying based on all of our experiences, these are visitors. Guest volunteers, what that really means, because it does not mean board approval and needing all of your clearances. And there's already some language in there. And then position volunteers, which would include a coach, they're a position. So what we would sit down and do is, if we approve this, almost classify those areas. And what I've already told the leadership team is, if we come up with something that we've never seen before, it automatically goes to position volunteer until we determine otherwise, because then it would require board approval, all of that. So some of it was, we kept getting caught in terms. Simplify, 3 terms. One of those, only of those 3 would require board approval and all the other information around it.
Who will be the poor souls tasked with,
Yeah, who's gonna
those
police that?
categories?
It's better than it even is now. So it's, I think I don't know, I want to, I mean, Tim could speak, but I think we kind of came to some of this summer when we had some time to actually look at it and go, okay.
So we're gonna let guest volunteers who do not need clearances and board approval assist in a classroom?
So we, by policy, it's been in the policy. That was something we looked at right away. Yes, what was identified as that is truly getting, I think, the clarity that if someone is under direct supervision at all times, never, ever, ever, ever alone with the kid, was where we were interpreting that.
You're gonna police
Again, we're just trying to clean up a policy that already exists. And we were just funneling, we weren't really ever, I'm not sure we ever were thinking about guest volunteers. It was either visitor or position at all times.
Is the only difference board approval?
Board approval and clearances. And direct, go back to what I would take the board to is direct volunteer contact. So care, supervision, guidance, or control of children. We were looking at that as being position volunteer versus guest volunteer is you are not supervising, you are not guiding, you are not coaching them, you are not teaching them. The clearest example I think in a classroom setting would be grandma comes in to read to the kids and sits on a chair, never leaves with a kid, does anything. She's a guest volunteer. Grandma comes in and is going to create a project with the students, work with 2 or 3 students at a time in the back of the room and or out of the room. They are supervising, under control, like controlling the kids. That was one of the clear things we were looking at, even already in the policy. It referenced reading to a classroom.
What if it's not grandma though, and it's a parent who does have a background in the classroom with the kids?
So your only other option in this then is you're eliminating guest volunteer. Is there ever a case you want, and I think what's tough with that is there are certain things I think the principals would tell you that we're trying to identify that would only be guest volunteers.
I think outside of the classroom, yes. I think if you're inviting them in the classroom, I think you should have.
At all times.
I think if you're gonna work the table at the front door for like grandparent lunch, fine, you don't have direct student contact all day. Or for a period of time. But when you invite them in the classroom.
What
I mean,
about,
I don't know, if kids.
what about band parents chaperoning football games?
On the bus with them?
Would be a position volunteer.
Yeah, I think it'd be position volunteer.
Yeah.
They could be on a bus, sitting with the kids, supervision in the back of the bus.
Yeah, according to this, a position volunteer is field trips, chaperones, tutors, coaches, activity advisor, recess library aides. Guest volunteer would be anyone assisting in the classroom, pretty much that's directed by an employee. So they're someone, pretty much if a parent, I guess, would want to come in and read or assist in a class that's supervised in the classroom with the teacher that's already cleared by the state and approved by the board.
So again, I'm bringing this to you because this is, we're sitting on a policy right now that we're not even following in that there is a guest volunteer, and we are by policy right now, we're probably requiring certain people to have clearances that just by wording wouldn't need them. So I think that's just the piece.
I would rather be safer than sorry. I mean, I'd rather require too much documentation than not enough if something happens.
Well, it gives them the opportunity to do that other stuff if they
I
start.
mean, it
getting
gives you some
involved.
gray area here, like the
Yeah.
stuff said about reading to the classroom. Well, who is in the classroom? You know, when I look at guest volunteer, I think of the guy that may help pick up chairs after a basketball game, or you know, help the wrestling team put the mats out. Who's there under direct supervision? That's more just a guest helper, not so much as somebody who goes into a classroom.
I'm thinking like school store, all those parents they're board approved, you know, and they don't, I mean, they still have direct contact with kids, even if they are supervised. I mean, we have substitute teachers that volunteer. So is that considered direct supervision under direct supervision of staff? Because that feels like a lot of loopholes.
So again, bring it to your attention simply because we need to do something with the policy, because right now we're all over there. So
I agree, things need to be clarified.
Yeah.
I mean, we've gotten some
Be
situations
simplified.
last year that, depending on how you classify.
how about we do this? How about I work with the leadership team to look at those 3 terms that we have here. We'll start kind of listing our experiences of what these positions, we can keep the conversation going. I'm comfortable as long as we're talking about it and trying to some clarity, that it's an open conversation. If it's not solved immediately in the next couple months, and we need to talk about it a little bit at each meeting until we get some clarity. But I think some of it is, can we begin to identify, because part of our thing is, we don't want to exclude certain events. Like, we want to make sure Grandparent Day can happen. We want to make sure certain, like,
What would be the impact if we only set up like a guest volunteer to be eligible for things like reading to students or doing the grandparents?
we could do that. We could
What would be the
identify
impact?
certain exact wording of it if we wanted
I was
to.
going to say, what would be the impact if we took it away for the teachers or the interactions for programs we already have?
If you're gonna be in a classroom, you need to be board approved. There are things you wouldn't.
Yeah.
We'll work on it. We'll work on.
Like the musicals.
Can we refine the guest volunteer to where it's very finite?
Kind of responsible for your own child.
Sure.
Yeah.
So what we'll work on is, we'll work guest volunteer. If there really is specific roles we can determine, we'll bring that back to you, and that would be specific in the language. Outside of that, it's a position volunteer. Okay. I want to belabor. We'll. You don't need to.
There are 11 policy changes, updates on the agenda for next week. Let's make sure you take a look at those. They are the final readings. And that is everything with legislative and policy.
Everything? Okay, move on to 11, athletics and extracurricular. Snyder and Dr. Weaver. Yeah, who's Mr. Snyder? Your board member? Who's Mr. Snyder? I read that and I thought,
Oh my gosh. Oh, Brenda's not.
just to show Brendan, totally gave us, they kept us on our toes. Ooh, I said
Gotcha.
it out loud and I thought, wait a
I
minute.
apologize.
Am I forgetting? I thought I've been taking a lot of drugs this week. It's really starting to
She's been sick.
affect my. I've been sick. Not for any other reason. I thought, wow. Mr. Snyder. So, how about you, Dr. Weaver?
Sure.
Take it by yourself.
Proposed agenda items. That would be 9A and 9B. Any question on those?
Non-essential volunteer. Yet another category.
Question? No. All right, nothing further?
All right.
Want to share something?
So before we adjourn, we're good. I want to take a minute to recognize one of our board members, PSBA recognition. School board service, on behalf of the Pennsylvania School Board Association, school board service has been a long and crucial part of our nation's legacy and its commitment to public education. As the first school boards association in the United States, PSBA has a rich history with more than 125 years of service. The consummate school directors are described as ethical, principled individuals with a deep desire to serve. They believe in the value of our public schools and local control of public education for the benefit of all students. Today's school districts are expected to offer more services along with world-class instruction with limited resources. These expectations provide a tremendous challenge for school directors, unpaid volunteers who dedicate their time to the schools and community they serve. For almost 40 years, PSBA has been acknowledging the contributions of dedicated local school directors with long-term service. The honor roll is the association's way of thanking those individuals who exemplify leadership by giving unselfishly their time and talents to the betterment of the public schools, serving students across the Commonwealth. From PSBA, very pleased to recognize Mr. Brett Osterman for his, how many years of service now? 8? That's with 8 years of service to the Milton Area School District. Thank you, Brett.
Anything from any other board members before we have a motion to go into executive? Okay, motion to go into executive, personnel. Okay, motion and a second. All in favor signify aye. I have no ayes. Come on. What out of you? All right, we have no further business. Thank you all for coming.
For the board, we're going to go to the office conference room.
We'll see you next week.
Like in the end or?
Got it.
Thank you.